Hello and welcome to My Woolly PhD. My name is Liz Scarf and this is a weekly video about what I'm thinking and making each week in my anthropology PhD, all about wool here in Iceland. And when I can, I try to get an interesting background from Iceland, and I could this week, but it means that it's going to be a ramble because I've got no notes. But so behind me are these glorious sheep having some dinner, and they were shorn this week, so now they are in the shed for most of winter. They'll go out on some nice days and things, but they'll kind of spend a lot of their time here because they'll be too cold outside. On the left I've got some ducks, and on the right I've got chickens, and they're all kind of bedding in for the night, but who knows, we might get some cameo performances. Let's see how we go. Now this week, I don't know what I was thinking about, but I got really irritated by something I saw on Instagram today, and now I can't think of anything else, and I'm going to talk about that. And I think actually irritation is a really interesting doorway for anthropologists to inquire into not just why they're irritated, but kind of trying to unfold cultural dynamics or logics that are in the background and different processes there, right? So while it can be really easy to think, oh, we're supposed to be neutral, it's not actually how it works. But you get curious about the things that irritate you. Anyway, so the thing that irritated me was that I'm going to backtrack a little bit. The Game of Wool, the British reality competition TV show, started a few weeks ago. And somebody I haven't watched it yet because I have to get a VPN, and I just have not kind of gotten to it yet. I'd like to watch it. Anyway, apparently somebody misrepresented Fair Isle knitting, the definition of it or something, and then there was a lot of reactions online and whatever else. So somebody created a slide deck about different types of stranded knitting across Europe. They had 4 or 5 different examples, and they kind of created a list of rules for them. Oh, hang on. Okay, sorry about that. Someone came in to move the sides of the pen so the sheep could get to more of the feed. They've got a really cool system here where there's a big alleyway down the centre of the pens, and they just roll out a big round bale of hay, and then they move the sides of the pens closer and closer as the sheep eat away at it. Anyway, it's very clever. So they're going to be munching more now than they were before. Anyway, so yeah, there was this thing about Fair Isle knitting, and this person created this kind of description of different stranded knitting techniques across Europe and a list of kind of rules for them all, right? And a lot of the stuff about the local pacer just wasn't correct. I sat on it for a bit and just thought, it's really irritating. It was so irritating. I was like, what are their sources? And I reread the post, and they'd put the source for the Icelandic one as this website that's a tourist website. And I just thought, okay, this explains it. So when you're doing a PhD, you often first, like in anthropology, you first do a bunch of desk research, right? So you're sitting at a desk, you're reading papers, you're also reading academic and non-academic literature. And for me, reading about Iceland, I read a bunch of lay literature, so tourist websites are included on that. And there's a huge difference between what is being said on tourist websites and other travel blogs and other places where you'll see non-academic literature, and then the academic literature. There's a big difference there. And you can already see how things that are kind of true in the academic literature are misrepresented or not repeated, or they're not there on the lay pages. And then the difference when you get in the field to what you read, I cannot overstate how different it is to actually be here and then talk to people and see their work and their craft practices. So even in this sort of field of just small little niche around knitting, the difference between what is written both academically and in lay literature and then what is practiced is quite significant. I can even look back at my confirmation essay, which is a big research piece you do at the start, right? And I can go through there and go, that's not right, that's not right. And that's all referenced in literature, right? And I go, well, that's not what people say here, actually, or that's not how they do it here. Why do they, why was it published like this? And I think part of what got me more and more irritated with this post was reading the comments saying, this is such great information, I would read a whole book about this, like all this stuff. And I just thought, wow, I don't even know if the other ones are correct either, but this is a certain kind of, well, there's a few issues, right? Again, sorry about the ramble because I just don't have notes with me. There's two main issues for me that arise, and this is barely thought through. Most of these videos are barely thought through, to be honest. Ask me in 2 years' time what I think about these ideas and it will be probably much more interesting and enlightening. But one is around, it's easy to kind of look at things where people kind of get upset about, let's say, just be really specific. In knitting, when people get upset about their knitting traditions being misrepresented. And I think this kind of behaviour ends up feeding stereotypes of women as being traditionalists who are kind of stuck in the past, especially knitters. It's boring, it's old, it doesn't evolve, it's not innovative. But the story doesn't get told that here are women pushing back against globalisation, against cultural appropriation, against capitalism, right? Because here's multi generations of people who've developed, sustained, innovated a craft practice. And then someone comes along post-industrialisation and says, hey, I can get machines and I can get cheap labour in Southeast Asia and then I can sell a heap of these and I can not pay anybody who developed this because now it's popular. I don't have to pay anybody for what I'm now going to leverage from that. And I actually think that's what a lot of people are fighting against, but it doesn't get sort of told as a story like that. So those are the first thing that kind of irritated me, was just the way in which people standing for traditional craft practices that I don't fully understand, and I don't think many of us fully understand what is actually happening when we're doing that. So then to see them misrepresented, I was like, oh, here's another thing that happens, right? Is foreigners, people like me, people like this person who wrote this post, right? We can start profiting, right? Not just from the traditional craft practice, but from getting around saying what it is and what it isn't. And I kind of thought, who's really got the authority to say what it is and what it isn't? And how do we give them a voice rather than taking the voice and saying, oh, well, here I am as an Australian researcher, I can tell you what it is or what it isn't, rather than how could I use my Australian researcher privilege to help Icelanders defend their tradition. Not that they need it, to be honest. They've already got it legislated, so that's well done. It's there. But it just did make me think then about how it's easy to kind of profit from these responses when you're not from that place as well. So this post is profiting, right? That's it. That's social media engagement. That equals something at some point. So I don't know. I said there was a couple of things. I don't know if I said those couple of things. Maybe I did. Anyway, I'm going to have to think more about that. I'm sure there was something else I wanted to mention about it. I mean, there's a whole gendered thing in here too, right? Around gender, but because women are getting narrated in a certain way when they try to defend their cultural traditions. Oh yeah, and I guess I would say, like, I haven't seen anything here that makes me think kind of women are stuck in the past, certainly around craft things. So many women here in farming, especially in wool farming, they're incredibly innovative and incredibly responsive to changing cultural conditions, economic conditions. So I find it's really interesting, this kind of way in which stories of being traditionalist get kind of attached to women, not, oh, look at how they're grappling with tradition and innovation in really successful ways. Maybe that story is getting told somewhere, I just haven't found it yet. Anyway, we shall see. So, That's what I've been thinking about this afternoon, obsessively. Partly because I think it's really, irritation is a really interesting doorway, as I would say. So, I don't know, what have you been irritated about from the Game of Wool or other things happening from there? I think a lot of people have been really irritated by that show. I think it's really interesting how feisty knitters get. It's cool. Okay, what have I been making? Well, I'm actually wearing, it's too cold. I don't think it's been above 4 degrees for weeks now, but anyway, I'm wearing the Benjamina Lopa Pacer that I made. It's lovely. Very happy with that. But I have been working on, and my darling possum daughter, if you are watching and you don't want a spoiler for the sweater I'm making you, avert your gaze for the next few minutes, but you can still listen. This is the the Althea by Steingass. What's her first name? Jennifer Steingass. And it's a top-down Lopa Pacer, and I'm knitting it in the Plutalope, which is the unspun yarn. It's like a pencil roving. I think I said last week I didn't know what it was called. I'm pretty sure it's like a pencil roving, but a bit, well, it's very thin. Anyway, it's quite fragile in some ways when you're knitting it, but once it's in the knit, it's very strong. But it's made me slow down a lot and realise that I'm actually a bit tense when I'm knitting usually. I am a tight knitter and I hold a lot of tension in my yarn, but you can't do it with this. So it's been really interesting, and I had to knit a lot slower, and I just had to pull back 2 rows. And I tell you, you can't frog this stuff like you can frog other yarn. So that was a bit slow and a bit frustrating. Anyway, that's the only thing I am working on. I made a sample beanie during the week, but I don't have that here to show. Anyway, it was like a Christmas sample thing for a stall. That was fun. But I am back to just working on this, and I have to say, this, if you can, where's the camera? I have no idea where the go. It must be this end. This fabric is so delightful. There's the inside. It's very exciting. Anyway, this still got a bit of a tight timeline. I'm pretty sure I can still make it if there's no other big knitting diversions. Yeah. So that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Yes, and I'd be very interested in what doorways of irritation you have inquired into in the woolcraft arena. I don't know. And what did you find? What did you find from your irritation? What, or not? Did you just go for a rant and you want to share it again? I'm really interested in rants. I do mostly try to be a bit of a builder, not a knocker. So I am always a bit cautious about having a bit of a rant and being sort of irritated with people. But I think, maybe that's what the other thing I was going to say about this actually is how much you can't believe about a country or a culture based on the tourists' websites. Because they participate in sort of stereotyping their culture, whether they're written by a local or not, for the point of selling their country and their culture for tourism. And this has really interesting impacts in a culture, which I'm not a specialist in. Tourism studies isn't my area. But I think I've mentioned this before about the notion of the tourist gaze, right? The way in which tourist expectations then put pressures on Icelanders to perform, being a stereotyped Icelander. And I think that sometimes creates tensions and irritations locally. And then for some people it doesn't. They're just like, whatever, this is how I make a living now. So yeah, it's interesting. And it makes me think about, like, as an Australian, we're also very stereotyped. And when I meet people here, because I don't have a thick Australian accent, I have a different one. People sometimes not sure where I'm from, and they'll say I'm from Australia. Oh, I thought that might be it, but not quite. And then I'll sort of say to them, yeah, because I'm not talking like this, mate, so you're not really sure where I'm from. And so I can put on a more thick Australian accent, and then people go, oh yes, that's it. And Older people, I think, are a bit shy to ask this, but children are not. I've had multiple children then ask me, so how do you deal with all the bugs? And somebody else, another kid saying, so have you seen huntsmans? And I'm like, yeah, they're everywhere. And they're like, is it true that they don't bite? Yeah, or they can bite and it would be painful, but no, they're very shy and quite curious and really sweet, actually, yes. And so if you don't have any flies, it means you've got huntsmans. Anyway, kids are really curious about the bugs because we are really stereotyped as being not just dangerous bugs, but dangerous everything. Like, people are often like, whoa, how do you survive all the poisonous animals there? So again, it's like you kind of, when you travel as an Australian, you get to hear a little bit about the stereotyping that people are doing about your own country. And while I don't find any of them irritating, I'm also not having to make a living out of promoting them or perpetuating them. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. You know, the Iceland that people buy or expect or come to expect and to buy, I think is quite different to the Iceland that is kind of just lived every day. It's not necessarily good or a bad thing, it's just an interesting thing. Anyway, okay, I think that was the other thing I wanted to mention about that. Yeah, okay, thanks for watching. See you next week.